Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Cyber Threats, How to Prep for the Upswing This Holiday Season. We're excited you could join us. My name is Pamela Delo, and I'll be moderating today's event. We're going to take a deep dive on what retailers should know to be prepared for the upswing in cybersecurity threats for the upcoming holiday season. We are thrilled to be joined by our three speakers, Rebecca Alter, Trust and Safety Architect for Sift, John Lunn, CEO, Gr4vy, and Scott Adams, Founder and CEO, Deflect. And before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items. Please note that the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right corner of your presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click on the Help widget located on the bottom left corner of your console. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. Please know we do capture all questions. To kick off, I'd like to ask each of our speakers to provide a quick introduction of themselves and their work. Rebecca, would you start?
Hi, my name is Rebecca Alter. I am a Trust and Safety Architect at Sift. Prior to Sift, I've spent a little over a decade building out various fraud teams at companies like Square, now Block, Gusto, and Stripe. I'm excited to talk about the holiday season with you all today.
John?
Hello, I'm John Lunn, CEO and one of the founders of Gr4vy. Gr4vy is a payment orchestration platform, so we sit between retailers and pretty much every payment company in the world and anti-fraud. So we're an integration layer that makes it easy to add, remove, and change your payment methods. Prior to Gr4vy, I was at 14 years at PayPal. Prior to that, I was at an early team at a company called Cybersecurity. So I've been in payments since the dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Scott?
Hey guys, Scott Adams here. So I've been doing fraud, risk payments, all this kind of stuff as a merchant for well over 20 years now. And more recently, we started a company called Deflect that kind of takes care of more of the post-authorization anti-fraud using different tools like Order Insight, compelling evidence, and these kind of things. We'll bring them all together to one place. Yeah, that's about me.
Great. Well, thank you all for that. So let's get right into it. We know that fraud surges during the holidays. In 2021, during Black Friday weekend, payment fraud for buy now, pay later increased 66% compared to the previous year. Researchers found that last holiday season, account takeovers, or ATO, events began rising 12% in October with a 66% surge on Black Friday. Well, what causes that holiday surge?
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump in. So I would like to say that the primary one is just increased transactions overall. So systems are overloaded, manual reviews become more challenging. And then also for the consumers as well, they're spending more money, so their bills might look higher. And so they may be delayed in, notifying their issuing banks or their credit cards of potential fraudulent transactions on their billing. And then there's also there's a lot of different things happening with shipping patterns. So maybe I always ship things to my home address throughout the year, but I'm going to be sending a bunch of gifts to a bunch of different locations throughout the year. So your typical trigger warnings for suspicious activity might not be suspicious during the holidays. And then I've also worked at companies that I know that reduce fraud thresholds during that time, just because there is so much traffic going on. And also they want to optimize for their good users getting their transactions through. So they don't want to block any of that good holiday spend. And just as fraud teams are preparing to meet the demands of the holiday sprints, fraud people are doing the same thing. John, what have you found?
I think, look, even criminals have Christmas. I think that's the main thing here is they have the same pressures we do as parents and families. They need to send gifts to people, and they're smart. Like the fraudsters have been doing this for a while. They know what they're doing, and they know that the merchants are I'm perhaps going to lower those fraud thresholds, as you said, or perhaps I'm going to lose stuff in the amount of work that's coming through, and that may maybe take a bit longer to do a manual review. And it's harder to spot it in all that mass of good transactions. It's harder to spot the bad transactions. So, it's really down to that. The same pressures exist for them as do for normal people. Scott, what do you think?
No, I agree with you guys. It seems like almost like what we saw during all the COVID years. It's kind of the same during holidays, is that things were relaxed. And on top of that, I think there's also a lot more fraud happening because there's a lot more companies that don't generally do as much online traffic. So, more restaurants, more small mom and pops, just more companies that are online or maybe come online and advertise a lot more during the holidays to take advantage of the Cyber Mondays and those kind of things. And so with that, just like you guys said, the criminals are out there thinking, well, this is a great opportunity for us too. And they're going to go and chase that low-hanging fruit. And it's easier for them between the relaxed rules and just less experienced merchants online.
Great. Those are great points. And John, you almost had me feeling sorry for the fraudsters trying to build their Christmas list. So what are the warning signs of fraud during the holidays that retailers might not be aware of? You said there's so much going on. What kinds of things should they be paying attention to that they might just miss?
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed is just like any kind of spike or increase either in traffic or sales outside of your annual projections maybe does not indicate that the marketing team has exceeded their goals, but it could be a sign of negative traffic on your website. And so just in my experience as a fraud manager, when I see those spikes, I get concerned. I don't get excited. So it's a good time for you to really dig in to make sure that increased traffic is happening from good actors and not bad actors. And then what I also noticed that since around 2020, there's definitely been a change in how consumers shop for the holidays. So it's not just one-day sales that either happen on Black Friday or maybe the week before Christmas, but what we're seeing is consumers spend a lot more money about a month and a half from that Black Friday sales all throughout December. So that gives you an increased window to also review the chargebacks that you'll be getting in. And so make sure that you look at those chargebacks that are coming in from your Black Friday or Cyber Monday sales so that you can see that there might be any new patterns emerging or something that's happening outside of the norm.
Great.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, one thing I always tell merchants is to look at those spikes, and projections could work to say, well, if it's outside of that, but also just look at other normal patterns, like where do you normally get sales from? What do you normally sell? And if it's outside of those, then definitely check on marketing. Maybe they had a promotion on an item, and that caused it. But if you can't really explain it, and for sure with the analytics with numbers, not just the marketer saying, yeah, it's because of us, then you definitely got to dig into it. And I've seen that really, it's not just the holidays. That's good advice, I think, anytime. And I've seen it happen over and over. It's like you get this big spike, and you can't explain it. Marketing says, oh, we're just doing a good job, or it's because we've been building all this up for all this time and now it finally worked. Well, if it's not explainable, you need to try to explain it, and it may very well be fraud.
Wow. Okay, so the good news may not be quite as good as you're anticipating.
Hopefully it is.
Hopefully it is. Now, there's an increase in two types of fraud in particular, account takeover or ATO, and AI. Let's talk about ATO first. Why is there an increase in this one specifically, and how is it evolving? Rebecca, I'm going to turn to you one more time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, so Sift just released our Q3 2023 Digital Trust and Safety Index report, and the numbers are really staggering in my opinion. We actually found that account takeovers have jumped 354% year over year. And in particular, it's really impacting fintechs, which are experiencing an 808% year over year increase. And then the food and beverage industry are also experiencing quite a surge with the 485% increase. And so when I think about those numbers, that's just like mind boggling, right? Especially if you're trying to combat them. And one of the reasons that we've identified that we're seeing this increase is a trend that we've noticed, which we're calling fraud as a service. And so what we're seeing is fraudulent actors are marketing themselves on forums like Telegram, and then also just on social media. So on the social, the surface web as well, where they're advertising that they can, hey, you know what, we can go ahead and help you get these items for free. We can help you get this food at a discounted rate. And so really what it's doing, it's expanding who might be willing to enter into fraudulent activity, who maybe either wouldn't do it themselves or maybe didn't have the technical skills to go ahead and do all the things that are needed to commit this type of online fraud. They can now go ahead and reach out to an intermediary or person in the middle and go ahead and help them get these services for free. And so it's wild, the kinds of conversations that we're monitoring on a week over week basis, just how these fraudulent actors are marketing themselves and how many people are willing to engage with them in these forums. I mean, these forums that we're monitoring, we're seeing thousands of people in them and reading these things for free, which has been, quite a new thing that we've observed within the industry.
John, what are your thoughts?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, look, if you look at the evolution of fraud, and it's basically a game of cat and mouse, right? So you put in one set of controls, and then the fraudster finds a way to go around them, or they find a route to defraud, and you put in a control to stop that. And so essentially, like the guns get bigger in the arms race, as it were, and the fraudsters are always looking for the weakest link here. So we've got introductions, things like 3D secure, anti-fraud products like Sift, etc., tokenization, Apple Wallet, Google Wallet. These all get put in place, and the fraudster thinks, where's the weakest link? Where's the easiest way to get through this? And the weakest link for ATO is the consumer. So if you can get the consumer to give you legitimate details, then you can get around all the fraud protections. So that's what's going on with that, essentially.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that sort of back to my first statement, just around the idea that there's a lot of less experienced or less prepared merchants out there this time of year. It's one of the things we used to do a lot in anti-fraud. I recommend was, look at how long you've known the customer. Is it a logged in account, not a guest? Is it a customer that you've had for a long time? And one of the ways we did that often was to look at those accounts. When did they create the account? And like I've seen that still today, even in some pretty advanced systems, looking at that variable. And so the fraudsters know, especially as a service, they can attack tons of accounts, and they can just sit on them. And then if they get lucky, and they can do it automated. So if 1 out of 10 merchants they try to hit is still using that variable, that alone might get them around things like 3D Secure. It might get them around a lot of the two-factor things, because, well, why would I slow down my good customer? I already know them, right? But it might be a fraudster. And when I was in video games, we saw that a ton. And they would go as far as even botting inside the game to show it's not just that they create an account, but they play the game. They play it every day. They play it for hours. So again, why would I not accept a transaction from them? And I should make.
Yeah. Right. And I think like different verticals too that we're seeing within the fraud as a service, like one of the things I mentioned earlier is that we see an increase in ATOs for food and beverage industries, and people might be like, well, why are you seeing it there? And I think really, food is a basic necessity. So it's one that people will always want to get food or have access to food. And the other thing, I think, again, back to this concept of fraud as a service, like people just think, what does it matter if I get a free taco from Taco Bell? They have so much money, or who cares if I just get like one hamburger from McDonald's or this huge corporation, like I can have this hamburger. But if you compound that for the business, it becomes quite a large sum of money over time. Just how many people are actually being involved in these scams.
Right.
And that's the same point too. It's the quick service and fast food, these kind of things, weren't online 5 years ago. 10 years ago for sure, but even 5 years ago, until COVID, for the most part, why were you online? And you had to go to the store to buy stuff. So now that's just low-hanging fruit. They're not protecting themselves very well.
Right. Great point. And that increased fraud, as you said, has a very real impact on retailers and their customers. John, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, just think of it. When an account takeover happens, it really impacts the relationship between the consumer and the merchant, right? So, firstly, the merchant might tell you might get a warning from your bank or your provider, and it erodes that trust you have in that merchant going forward. Like, as a consumer, why would you shop with that merchant again? Like, they've lost your card, fraud has happened on that website using you, and it really does erode the trust you have in the merchant. But what's even worse is, like, if a card has been compromised on that merchant's side or removed, you get as a consumer, you need to go and get a new credit card, right? And then for the next 60 days, all your subscriptions fail, right? Because you have to go and update that card here, there, and so you're getting a constant reminder how bad that experience was with the merchant. So you think how hard we try to attract customers onto our website, and all that spend on marketing, this totally destroys that relationship.
Sure. Scott, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I very much agree with John. It's such a long tail, right? Anything that affects the consumer then affects the business, and vice versa. We like to talk about the costs of fraud, right? Those costs drive prices up to the consumer, right? And they also, like you said, your rebills fail, your subscriptions fail as a consumer. Well, the merchants are also failing, and so it's kind of a catch-22. It's like, you say, well, the consumer should protect their cards, but we should protect the ecosystem. And so there's such a dichotomy there, and I think until we look at it that way as a whole, as an industry, then it's problematic, because generally everybody passes the blame and just kind of pushes around like, who's going to protect us? But I like to remind people we all need to protect it, because it impacts us all. And then the other thing I talk about a lot is just the idea of collaboration, that we all need to collaborate. Even though we all do somewhat similar things, or like when I was a merchant, I tell merchants collaborate with what they would consider a competitor on anti-fraud, because you might be competitors in business and sales, but you're really not on the fraud side. If you don't collaborate, you don't learn, and we need to just protect the whole environment, because if they don't get through my service into my system, the fraudsters are going to go after the other guy.
Yeah. I think that's so true. I think collaboration is key, and then also where and when you can, to get data from other sources to help you just build out that collaborative network. And then just to also reiterate on what John was saying about like churn and loss of trust, we actually, in that index report, we ask consumers, would they churn if they experience an ATO on their account? And 74% of consumers said that they would leave a site if their account had been taken over again. And I think that's just a really staggering number. And what John was saying is companies spend so much money to acquire these customers. So losing a customer is extremely costly, and you're not just losing what they've spent on your site, but also potentially their long-term value on your site as well. So it's really important that you keep those customers that you work so hard to get.
Yeah, I also think there's this trust in the brand too, because like, I think a good example, my mom was calling me a couple weeks back that their card was taken over somehow, and they kept getting charges from one of the big online video streaming services, and they use it, but they were getting multiple pings from it, multiple bills, and so they canceled their cards. They did all the things you should do as a consumer. But then next month, to talk about churn, they actually got hit again by that same company on the same card, but different number, because of account updater. I love account updater as a merchant, but it actually does cause some problems like that. And they're all like, they said, oh well, they've billed me twice already and it's fraud. So now they've actually lost trust in that brand, even though it's the fraudster's fault, but the brand didn't catch it. Right. So you're not saying they did a bad job, just we need to remember that happens. It's not necessarily your fault, but your brand gets hit no matter whose fault it is. So we just have to, again, we got to protect the whole ecosystem, and we've got to do it in collaboration.
That's a great point. So we've talked a little bit about account takeovers. So let's talk now about the rise of AI in automation fraud. How is AI making it easier for people to create fraud and harder for consumers to identify it? Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, AI is interesting. It's become a buzzword lately. And it's really been around forever, because really at the base, AI is machine learning. It's just how does it do it? And so, we've had it a long time, but it's just now gotten to a point that it's super easy to use, like, all the tools out there around generative AI. So I think one problem is it's much easier to make things look like they're people. The deep fakes of the images, and so we can kind of, if you want to say, counterfeit IDs, pictures, photos, voices, so much easier now. And so it's easy to trick the consumer. And it used to be that one of the big, say, hurdles for the fraud world, doing things like takeovers via social media, or takeover via actually making phone calls to call centers, these things, was that it had to be a human. Well, now it doesn't necessarily have to be. So I think over time, those things are going to come into play. And then again, just because it's so much easier, you can do a whole lot with brute forcing and guessing when you've got an intelligence behind it. Is it human intelligence? Not exactly, but it's fast and it's smart.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we're seeing, I agree, it's kind of a bit of a buzzword right now, but and I think in the fraud world, we've been using AI for quite some time with machine learning. But I think that the key distinction that I've seen in this round of innovation is just the large language learning model, which is enabling fraudulent actors to be able to have correct grammar, correct spelling, and in multiple languages, which, before it used to be an indication of potentially not your usual user if their language patterns had changed. But that's something now that these fraudsters have access to. So what we've seen is like an increase in phishing attempts, and also these scams just look way more real to the consumer. So it's harder and harder for consumers to identify when something is legitimate and when something is fake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, look, AI is a set of tools, I should say, that does what a lot of people could do with a machine, right? And so not that long ago, we were all worried about, warehouses in countries of fraudsters who were making phone calls and, trying to run attacks, and that just got cheaper, right? Basically, that just become cheaper, a lot more easy to access for the fraudsters. And again, back to the sort of cat and mouse arms race, this means, you need bigger algorithms, right? So it's basically just up the game. It's pushed it up a level. And so there's the one side, the fraudsters now have access to tools that make it easier for them to fraud, which means you need better tools to fight that access. And I think that's really part of it. It's an arms race. You need to get there. And the nice thing about AI is, anti-fraud companies are also able to use it, and they've got a lot more experience of using these tools, and hopefully they can up the game and make it even harder for the fraudsters. And it's going to continue like that pretty much forever.
Well,
that's not new, right? That's what it's always been. The other thing I'd say on that, really, is what you said. Maybe another way to put it is just the barrier to entry got a lot lower.
Yeah.
For fraudsters now.